Welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We are here with David Finberg from peaksdigitalmarketing.com. Now, this is a guy that you want to sit up and pay close attention to because David has been making websites since he was 9 years old. He's the founder of Peaks Digital Marketing. He has generated tens of millions of dollars in revenue for his clients, but for him, success is making an impact on others' lives while being able to do what you love and make your business the best it can be. So, David, glad to be talking to you.
Hey, Robert, thanks so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure.
And it is a pleasure to have you. And so yeah, like SEO and websites, it's one of these topics where it could be really fun if we make it fun when we talk about all the cool things we do with websites, or it could be really bland and boring and dull if we get too much into the technicality. So I am looking forward to talking to you about some fun stories, some insights, some aha. So in today's breakneck, fast-paced, exciting world of search engine optimization, what the heck do we need to know? I mean, what's been going on the last 6 or 12 months?
Man, so a couple of big algorithm changes this year with respect to things like backlinks, site speed, content, user experience. So you might be sitting there guessing like, what the heck are all these things, right? And I'm really excited to get to share some of these actual insights and kind of litmus tests that you can use to determine whether your site has some room for improvement, maybe some low-hanging fruit opportunities, and how you can go about actually implementing some of these changes on your site so that you can get make an impact and get more value out of your existing traffic base, or potentially even grow your traffic base, right? So looking back over the last year, one of the most important things that I harp on is actually harped on quite heavily in the SEO industry right now. There's some red herrings, there's some like people shouting from the rooftops, and yes, it is important, but no, it isn't the end of the world, right? But one thing that you really want to focus on is your site speed. And so why is site speed so important, right? Site speed is one of those kind of gray areas that most people don't think about when they're making or developing a website. Your site speed actually has a ton to do with how well you're going to engage and retain your traffic. And so there's some stats out there done. There's a study done by Cloudflare, which is a content delivery network. They specialize in providing fast user experiences, and they've done their own internal research and data sampling, and they found that sites that convert higher have lower speed, lower thresholds of speed. So they load a lot quicker, right? And so if your site loads in 8 to 10 seconds versus, let's say, 3 to 5 seconds, right, you can actually double your conversion rate just by speeding up your site. And so that's one of the stats that was thrown out there, was that conversion rate and site speed have this correlating relationship, and that the faster your site is, especially once you get down into that 1, 2, 3, 4 second range, right, you can see this exponential increase. And every site's a little different, right? So don't quote me on 50%, but roughly that was the stat, right? Was, you go from an 8 or 10 second site down to a 2, 3, maybe even a 4 second site in terms of loading time, your conversion rate can effectively double. So why is that, right? Why do we care so much about site speed? Why does Google care so much about it? The main consideration or main kind of distinction that you want to make with site speed is that people are impatient, right? And so I don't know if you're like me, like I grew up in the dial-up era, right? We had a 28.8 modem. It was an extremely slow experience. There was no broadband in the early 90s, right? And so, over time, as the internet got faster, right, our expectations became more aggressive, right? And for those of us that were on the internet in the early dial-up days, like, we know that things are faster now, right? We know that the website speed is like 10 times what it was before if you're on a cable internet connection. That said, when we're on our phones is really where the speed makes a difference. And so, it used to be we'd go load a web page, we'd go get a bowl of cereal, get something to eat, come back, and it'd be loaded, right? And we were okay with that. Now, especially for some of the Gen Z TikTokers, especially for just millennials, boomers, everyone, right? We have this expectation that speed equals quality, speed equals, consistency, and it equals success. And so, when you're on that 3G connection and you're in that shoddy area of town with low cell phone service, Google wants to make sure that your site can still load quickly. So what happens, right? When you're sitting there on your phone and it's taking 10 seconds to load, what do most of us do? We hit the back button. Hitting that back button, Google actually looks at Chrome and behavior that happens in Chrome to determine how effective of a job that they did in serving the right website, right? And so Google's whole mantra is let's create the best experiences for our users, right? So when someone searches something and we present them with that number one website, that website is number one for a reason, right? It's got the best experience, the best content, maybe the best loading speed, right? And so loading speed is a factor in how Google determines the quality of your website. And so another factor is when people hit that back button, right? They're telling Google this was a low quality site. Right. So what does that mean for us? Well, if we're on, inherently not everyone has a 5G yet, right? We're not at the point where no matter where we are in the world, internet speed is at a point where it's like broadband at our house. And so what Google's really looking for is, can we optimize our sites to prioritize content that is above the fold, right? Or the hero part, is some people reference it as. What's the content that you first land on? How quickly can you load that portion of your content? We're not asking you to load the whole website right away, but we want to make sure that a user is able to see something in a very short threshold of time, whether they're on 3G, 5G, 28.8, right? Like maybe not 28.8, but like broadband. So that's where the speed matters. And that's where you can get some user behavior signals that work against your SEO, where people are hitting the back button, right? We're impatient. It doesn't matter if it's going to a satellite or going to a cell tower and then going to Google, coming back. Like we expect it to load it under 4 seconds, right? So that's really where a lot of business owners have this inherent opportunity in the sense that page speed can affect all of your traffic, right? If Google prioritizes it as a ranking factor, it's not the end all be all. Don't get it twisted. Don't let people sell you snake oil, but it is an important component. And so if your site is, you can run a speed test on your site by just going to Google and searching Google Page Speed Insights. Type your website in, it's going to tell you what your score is. A lot of websites, most websites that haven't ever optimized their speed, they might be like a 20 on mobile, right? It might be taking 8 or 10 seconds to load, right? Versus once it's optimized, typically we go for like a minimum of like a 50 or a 60 on mobile, right? And the goal is like a sub 4 second loading time. So not to get too far into the weeds, but for those of you that are comparing your scores, right? Like anything above a 50 or 60 is pretty low, right? On mobile, and on desktop, anything above a 90 is relatively low. Desktop should be a lot easier to optimize for. But if you take, if we just take a step back and walk through, right? Users are impatient. We expect convenience. We expect speed. When sites load slow, just think of a time when a site loaded slow for you. What do? You hit the back button, you go to the next one, right? Or you refresh it, or you try to figure out what the heck's going on, right? And then oftentimes you're going to hit the back button. So these are kind of detrimental to conversions. They're detrimental to getting people to stay on the site. Your bounce rate's going to be higher. You're going to have a lower amount. Let's say you're putting 100 leads to your website, maybe only 50 are going to stay there, right? Whereas if we can, instead of just adding more leads to the top of the funnel, better convert the traffic that you have, that's a one-time fix, or maybe a couple times a year where you're analyzing your site speed, but it's not like this huge, recurring commitment that you need to maintain in terms of developers and content experts. It's much more granular, right? Hey, let's find someone to fix our site speed. Cool. So that can range, in price, depending on the size scope of your site, depending on what platform you're on, right? Magento sites can be thousands of dollars. WordPress sites can be, anywhere from 1 to 2,000, sometimes less, sometimes more. It just depends, right? And so, if you look at it as a low-hanging fruit opportunity, there's actually a reason why there's low-hanging fruit opportunities. Okay, so Google knows that site speed correlates to higher conversion rates, less bounces, better user engagement with your brand. One could argue that, when we visit a site that's really fast, the data supports that we're more engaged with that brand. We have more confidence and trust in that brand. But if your site experience is slow, maybe your experience with the brand's going to be slow, or the product's going to be a little clunky. But conversely, the perception of your brand could be exponentially improved if your site is really fast. You're going to be like, wow, these guys are on it. These guys and gals are fast. Their product's probably fast. Their service is probably great. If their site's slow, they're probably slow on service too, right? Or maybe their website isn't that good, and maybe their product's not that good, right? So we could go down a rabbit hole of excuses and labels of things of why people don't like it. But the fact of the matter is people don't like slow sites. So there's an innate opportunity.
Cool. Well, yeah, and just before we get like too far into it, I'm glad that we started with this with the page speed issue, because that's a thing where it's easy to see the result, right? Like when we first started, I was thinking like, oh no, we're going to talk about structured content or like meta tags or RSS feeds, and it's like this whole idea of the site speed. It was actually came to my mind a few minutes before you and I just now met. I went and looked at your website at first, and whenever there's these SEO guys on a call, I'm like, okay, how fast does their site load? And I'm like, well, what kind of tool do they use? Are they using WordPress? And I clicked around, and it made me realize that, well, there's probably like three different levels, right, of site speed. There's, like you said, you load it and it's slow, and it's like it's on a dial-up connection. And then there's like maybe the mid-range where you don't really think too much about it. You're like, oh, I'm just kind of navigating a website. Like you navigate Facebook, you're not really thinking about how fast Facebook is unless it's kind of having one of those slow days. But then there's like, when I went to your site, there's like maybe a handful of sites, and I would say maybe like one or two sites per day that I visit, where the speed, it's like just a hair faster than I'm used to, right? It's like I go to the page and I'm like, I'm used to like the white, and then like the header generates, and then the rest of it goes through. And I'm thinking like, he must run some kind of caching, or he must have the checkbox set where like it pre-caches or it pre-generates the whole site. And it was just like a hair faster. And for me, it was like this kind of like real subconscious kind of feeling. I'm like, okay, I feel like he's like maybe like 10% better or 10% faster than what I'm used to. And you're so right. And like, there's all these different reasons to do it, right? That, well, Google will rank you higher because Google are like the gods of the internet. If you appease the internet gods, if they want it to be faster, you do what they say, they will reward you by ranking higher. But then, as you also said, there's like the feeling of how the brand is. If the website is fast, then they know what they're doing. They have it dialed in. They keep things up to date. It's not some website that they made back in those dial-up days and let it sit. They keep it on the cutting edge. And it also makes me think that like, there's also the short attention span factor, right, David? Of like, if you have all these tabs open, or you never know if like your phone might ping, or some other notification might come up. I'm on your site, and the difference between like 7 seconds to get to what I want versus 17 seconds, that's huge. And so I think that that's a really great thing for everyone to think about, and a thing to kind of keep in mind of like, have a faster site, even if it means like a couple of seconds faster, or twice as fast, or optimize those images. And so you said search Google for Google Page Speed Insights to kind of be able to look at this tool, even if we don't fully understand it, to have a good kind of starting point of know what our score is, know where we're at. So that way it's not just some kind of guessing like, is my site fast or slow? Google Page Speed Insights. I love it. Sorry to cut you off, but just wanted to kind of recap and connect it all together as we keep on going here.
I appreciate you making that distinction. And to your point, I thought you brought up a really great tiered system. Like there's A's, B's, and C's, right? Like an A site might be 10% faster than a B site. And a C site's, an A site compared to a C site is a huge jump. There is a reducing rate of return, right? So I wouldn't go down the rabbit hole of trying to get it perfect. If you're at that place where it really is loading slow, you will see a pretty dramatic increase in your SEO, right? The other benefit, as you discussed, is it's a perception thing, and it's a conversion rate thing. Also, people look at it as an SEO factor as well. So just to put out there, like, it's not going to substitute great content or a great web experience. It's one of the factors. If you're already on that lower end of the threshold, definitely something that I would strongly recommend investing in, as it's going to help your paid marketing. It's going to help your email. It's going to help your direct traffic. It's also going to help your SEO, right? It's also going to help your social media, right? So people are going to be visiting your site from multiple different channels. And so that's kind of the just bring this full circle, right? It can help all of your channels convert higher, which is a huge low-hanging fruit opportunity when you look at the value that can be added by doing 20 to 40 hours of work on the website.
Awesome. Okay, so we're talking about low-hanging fruit, speed up your site. You don't have to spend too much time on it, but it'll help you in all these other ways. And so what else are you seeing as far as what we should be focusing on doing, and maybe what are people missing as far as making their website the best it can be, and get this SEO thing dialed in?
So that's a perfect segue. I'd say, looking at it, there's a couple of areas. Typically, user experience is one. So like look at other brands in your niche. Do they have better branded, better quality websites? Do they have better experiences? Are they more interactive? Are they doing things to keep people on the page longer? So these are more of like, think of this as your, not necessarily low hanging fruit, but something to think about over time, which is, does our website reflect the quality of our brand, and does it create a consistent experience when you place our brand next to our competitors? Right. And so a lot of people have a great desktop website and their mobile is a little iffy, right? Or their mobile is really great and their desktop's great, but the branding and the design of it just doesn't match to what a user would expect, right? And so the next kind of segue into that, more deeper into that, is like your content, right? So your visual design is really a reflection of your content. And so when we're looking at content, we're looking at above the fold content, right? Which pages have high bounce rates? Where people, either the speed was too slow or they didn't like the first message that they saw and they're bouncing away, right? In some cases, you'll have things like blogs where they will inherently have a high bounce rate. So don't freak out if you see a page that has a super high bounce rate and it's a blog. Sometimes people find what they need and they leave and they're supposed to bounce, right? It's just a discovery based query. It's not necessarily selling them something, right? On the reverse end, right? What can we do to better convert our users and create a better user experience? And so what I really recommend doing is finding an agency or finding someone in-house that can do some split testing for you, right? So Google Optimize is a great split testing tool. Hotjar, Crazy Egg. I really prefer Google Optimize. It gives you opportunities to make changes within the platform, so you don't have to actually make the changes on your website. And you can run some tests to see, hey, do people like this heading more, or heading A or heading B? Do they like the picture, of the woman holding, holding the product, or is this more of a manly product? And people want they, resonate more with a male holding the product. There are all these different split tests, right? But I would say start with come to a split test with uh you're basically becoming a professional experimenter, right? So you want to make sure the experiments are big enough, but they're also, you're not changing too many things at once and getting like mixed data, right? If you change 5 things and it converts better, it's like, well, which of these 5 things made it convert better, right? We don't know. Maybe it was all of them. Maybe it was just 1 or 2 of them. So it's important to approach improvements around the website from the perspective of, it's going to take some time. It's going to take you need to have a constant in that experiment, right? So don't go and change everything. Change like just the hero, or change, right, just certain elements of the page. Maybe it's the copy or the design, right? Start with 1 or 2 kind of core things that there's going to be a definitive result at the end of that split test, and let it run for a couple of weeks and see how it works. And so Google optimizes. You don't have to be a web developer to use it. It's got some really cool drag and drop functionality. It's another area where you'll be able to gather some insights and apply those insights to other areas of your site. Again, the whole goal, this is an SEO podcast, right, that we're talking about today, but a lot of this is how do we better convert, right? Not just add more leads to the top of the funnel. Well, that's going to happen organically as we create better content, better experiences, and get backlinks and really work on the site, speed and things like that. What we really want to guide you to, or if you were to get 0 additional hits, let's say you were at 100 hits last month and next month you're going to get 100 hits, how do we squeeze a little bit more fruit, or a little bit more juice out of that fruit, right? A little bit more orange juice. If we're only converting 2 people, taking this whole orange and getting a couple drops and throwing it away, how do we get 10 people or 20 people out of those 100, or 50 people out of those 100, right? And so there is no magic recipe for that. It's a lot of testing, it's SWOT analysis, it's looking at your market and comparing different brands and experiences from both qualitative and quantitative, right? Like, how long is their page? They have more content, they have better content or more comprehensive content. Hey, is their website, right, neat and clean? Does it load quickly? So some are qualitative, some are quantitative, but really just taking that, putting that experimenter hat on and saying, hey, I can start tomorrow gathering more data and figuring out. We had this business called Fully Accountable. They're an outsourced e-commerce accounting firm, and they came to us and they have this request a proposal page or schedule a call page, right? And we'd increased the traffic and things were progressing at a steady rate. Then it's like, well, how do we get more performance out of this campaign? And so what we started to see is that people were falling off, like going into the data is so important, right? And like understanding what's happening. And so what we saw was that these request a proposal pages, or the schedule a call page, I should say, um, could be converting higher, right? And so I think it was at a 2% conversion rate. And I think industry average for most stores is like somewhere around a 1%. So it wasn't bad, right? But like that means out of every 100 people that hit the page, 2%, or hit their website, not the page, right? But hit the website, 2% of that traffic was converting. So what we did is we changed the above the fold content. We put some imagery of the team. We put our phone number. We put some social proof and reviews. We eliminated the barriers to entry. So we didn't ask them for all this information. We just asked for like the email address, name, and phone number, and like a short message, as opposed to like, how much revenue do you bring, right? Like we're really trying to gather as much data to give them a great, sales experience that was inherently maybe turning people away. And so we took that from a 2% to a 7%. Now, this isn't some huge rah win-win, right? Like we're so great. It's just to show you the power of a couple of small changes can make a substantial impact. And that's where you might not even realize how big of an impact that if you were to tell me we were going to triple the conversion rate by a couple of small changes, I would have laughed, right? I've been like, oh, I'll believe it when I see it, right? Like I'm a very data-driven person. But once I saw that data come in, I was like, wow, this is like I did a double take, right? And I'm like, wow, how do we do this across the request a proposal page? How do we do this across other pages now, right? Knowing that people like to see faces, they like sleeker, cleaner, right? They like to see the reviews, they like to see a phone number in case they don't want to give away their information, right? There's all these different considerations that we're guiding the customer towards, as opposed to just fill out your information, right? Like looking back, it's very obvious why this converts higher, right? But it's not going to be when you're in that initial stage. It's like, hey, well, this is converting. It's a 2%. It's not bad, right? I challenge you to push the envelope a bit more, right? Take a look. How do you get a 20% conversion rate out of your site, right? Don't be satisfied. And some of that's going to come down to your targeting, right? Not all of this is necessarily from from these changes, but if you look at the data, it's very consistent, right? So out of the targeting that we had at the time, by making these changes, there was an improvement. And so that's the main goal, is like, if there was one low-hanging fruit opportunity to focus on, it's knowing what users like on your site and what they don't like, and how do we scale what's working and kind of trim out what's not working, and create experiences for users that are best in class. And a lot of SEOs argue, they say page speed isn't a huge ranking factor. It's a ranking factor, but people overemphasize it, and they say, well, content's a ranking factor, but it's more about how well your content does. And these things are true, right? But on the converse end, like people hitting that back button are really going to impact your score. So page speed contributes to that. If your user experience contributes to that, if your content or your above the fold content contributes to that, why wouldn't we, take the liberty to start looking at these things as levers that we can pull, and finding ways to have some data-driven, repeatable experiments that now we can use as ammunition in our marketing meetings with our teams. That's the biggest part of it, is like so many people are scared to fail, right? Let's just be married to the site. The web developer did it. It must be good. And as you and I both know, everything's objective. Not everyone's going to feel the exact same way. You can't please everyone, but you can get some insights from a large sample of data. And so, when it's like, well, hey, we didn't get as much sales this month, how awesome is it to say, well, let's take a look at this page. Let's really take a look at what's happening and find ways to get a better conversion rate. Maybe a traffic dip down, maybe there's some other reason, right? But that's, as a C-level exec, that's what I look for. My team is come to me with some solutions, and let's start figuring out where the gems are, instead of, settling for, hey, there was a Google algorithm update and we just aren't going to get as many leads now, right? Or, hey, our site speed, or whatever it is, right? It's just, these are things that I encourage you to start looking at. You don't have to be an expert at these right away, but it can be as simple as changing the color of a button. It could be as simple as, hey, we can't, optimize the entire site, but what we can do is we can optimize the images that are really large and get our page speed into a more acceptable range, which, right, might be that 80%. And then the last 20% is the hardest, right? So these are things that if we think about at a high level, right, we can talk to our developers, we can talk to our team, we can talk to our web designers, and for those of you that are these roles, right, you can now have the confidence in knowing that you're not objectively making recommendations. We're actually looking at how the market responds to this. And that's all we as marketers we can do is make decisions based off of the data. And not everything is going to be a winner. And that's good, right? We're actually making progress so that we can get to that perfect, I shouldn't even say the word perfect, but better conversion rate, or more ideal scenario where we're converting a lot higher. It's very similar to social media, right? It's like you can try 10 different pieces of creative, right, and get different outcomes from all 10. And so it's the same with the website, and these algorithms are really just designed to promote experiences that users like. So, you know, if you think about it from that perspective, you know, when Google does send that traffic test to your site and they see that you update your content, they're going to send a little traffic, and those users don't hit the back button and they really stay on the site and they're engaging and they're clicking and they're, you know, not bouncing away. Any day of the week, that's going to result in a better ranking for you. Whereas if you had a high bounce rate, Google's gonna be like, wow, these people really don't like this site. I'm not going to keep sending people to the site. But they're like, well, we sent 10 people here at 4:00 yesterday, and you know, 6 had a really good experience as opposed to like 2 from the previous page, right? Like now let's start seeing if we send a little bit more traffic, if people will continue down this path.
And yeah, and when I first came across that concept that Google checks the dwell time or whatever, they check when they click from a Google result to your website, and then if you click the back button, they time that and they say, did it take 30 seconds for him to give up and go back and see what happened? My mind was blown. And as you and I both know, like Google checks all kinds of little factors and things like that, and Google even themselves, they're always improving. And what the heck is Google but like a plain old white web page with just a search box and a button? But you could almost look at the front page of Google 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and even though all it is a search box and a button, you could probably almost tell like what year or what decade it was, just because they change up those little things. And like every time you check out on Amazon, every few months, it's changed up a little bit. So even these giants like Google and Amazon, as good as they're doing, as much of a dialed-in operation as they have, even they themselves are still striving for perfection. So why not guys like you and me, David, right? And so there's been a lot of interesting kind of like business and marketing lessons in here. And out of all the things that we've talked about, what is really clicking from me based on what you said here is that a lot of this conversion rate, optimization stuff, a lot of the search engine optimization stuff, it can be overwhelming. And maybe it might be one of these topics that in order to fully mentally digest it, we have to keep on like learning like a little bit about it, right? Learn a little bit about page speed, page rank, lazy loading, above the fold, split testing. Maybe we just keep having to digest it a little bit, and learning about it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be the one that does it, that we have to fully understand a tool, that we even have to make sense out of the split test result. But it's helping to kind of hear these concepts. And we might have heard these concepts before, but then because we're hearing from you again and again, it's like, oh yeah, I heard a long time ago that I need to be like running some kind of a split test and testing out my headlines or testing out a hero image or looking at my competitor's website and saying, I like how they had that interface, or I like how they made that interactive. Maybe we could absorb some of that. It helps to maybe revisit some of the things that we have considered, but then didn't follow through on, or kind of gave up on, because this is a kind of an ongoing process. And maybe these are some of the things that maybe every 6 or 12 months we should be looking into implementing some of these things that you have been mentioning. And so if someone says, okay, a lot of the things that David says make sense, and maybe this and this is now on my to-do list, but I'm thinking, well, I'm not even really sure where to start. I don't know if I'll have enough time. I don't know if I'll follow through. Do you and your team, your agency, perform some of these tasks? And how the heck do we find out more information? Where's the website? Where do we go? What should we know about this?
Absolutely. So if you need a fractionalized team to come in and handle anything from page speed to your split testing, I encourage you to check us out. peaksdigitalmarketing.com. Peaks like the mountaintop, plural, digitalmarketing.com. We do a free analysis and audit. Even if you just have a question, you're looking to get some guidance. Our whole mission is how do we provide value and empower your business to succeed, whether that's your team doing it or our team doing it. And so, if you have some questions and you're looking for some, direction, or you're looking for a Sherpa to help take you up the mountain, check us out at peaksdigitalmarketing.com. Just fill out a contact form. Someone will get in touch with you. And if you're looking for more SEO tips, I'm constantly syndicating social content around digital marketing, SEO, conversion-based strategies. You can check me out at David A. Finberg on Instagram, Facebook, and we do a little bit of LinkedIn as well. So, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. I hope you guys found some value. It is something, as you said, Robert, like if you start eating the elephant piece by piece, you don't eat it all at once, right? And so, I think just being aware of these things and starting to bring these up in your marketing conversations and really having that commitment towards maybe over the course of the next year becoming better at some of these needle movers will it'll show in the ROI of your campaigns, and will also show in the marketing meetings when you're able to review that data. And so, Robert, just thrilled to be on the show and really grateful to be here and be able to talk to your platform and connect with your audience. Again, feel free to check us out on the web if you have any questions. And looking forward to next time.
Well, fantastic. Well, I appreciate having you on, David. David A. Finberg on social media, peaksdigitalmarketing.com to find that Sherpa to lead you up the mountain. And what I really like about everything we're talking about here today, David, is like these are kind of like the foundational principles. These are things that things change, year after year. But 5 years ago, this was important. 10 years ago, all these things are still going to be important. There's no excuse. You mentioned at the beginning about a Magento, and I mentioned about WordPress. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, what platform you have. You need to be focusing on some of these conversion and these SEO factors that David mentioned. There's no excuse. You're not that special that you're exempt from the whims of Google. This is really important if you want to squeeze more juice out of the orange and maybe triple your conversion rate. So that way you don't have to triple your traffic, which seems like a way more unnecessarily complicated way of doing it. You can go to peaksdigitalmarketing.com, go there, check out the blog, fill in the contact form, even just to say hey to David and his team and see if there's something they can do for you. At the very least, get a dialogue started. peaksdigitalmarketing.com, and we'll see you there. And thank you, David, for stopping by and taking the time. I appreciate you.
Hey, my pleasure. I appreciate you too. Thanks, everyone.